Well, greetings and welcome everybody to another episode of Hippocrates Docs, Just One Thing for Health. I am so excited tonight because, there's so many people out in the world who are doing such great work and who are really making a difference in the lives of people as it relates to their health and in particular diet. And tonight we have one of those people with us. She's actually new to the Just One Thing for Health team, Lori DePietro-Standen. And we're going to talk about something this evening that I wonder how many people actually know about it. And if I sit back and think about the number of people who are struggling with obesity, diabetes, MS and lupus and other chronic illnesses, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoporosis, all of these things, even Crohn's disease, and all of these things that we find ourselves faced with. Yet, you know what? Little do we know that our food is contributing to it. And Lori has, someone else has cracked the code. She's bringing us the information. And tonight we're going to talk about the bliss point. Is it controlling your life? And what many of us don't realize is what the bliss point is and how it might be controlling our life. So without further ado, I'm going to say welcome, Lori. Welcome not just to the Just One Thing for Health on-call Q&A tonight, but welcome to the Just One Thing for Health team. It is such a great pleasure to have you here with us and working with us to help us to get this message out to more. So welcome. Say hello to everybody.
Hello. I am so excited to have met you guys, and first of all, in this field, in the plant-based field, it is a little bit of a rarity still to find people who are like-minded. It's more and more mainstream, but to find a whole organization that is centered around plant-based health it's so exciting for me. So I am really honored to be a part of it, and I've just loved working with you guys so far. So that's been really exciting for me.
Awesome. Well, Lori, tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about your background, how you got into this field, and how it is that you're so passionate about doing what you're doing right now.
Well, I come by it firsthand because I, like many people, most people in the United States, grew up eating the standard American diet. And as I got older, I continued to have, I started to have more and more health issues. And I always struggled a bit with my weight, although, I wouldn't say that most of the time I wasn't morbidly obese or anything, but I was struggling. I tried tons of diets. I tried Weight Watchers and the Atkins diet and the cabbage soup diet and the military diet and Slim Fast and chromium pills and everything else I could think of. And as I got older, my health got worse, and I actually gained more weight as time went on. I have a lot of history of heart disease in my family. My grandma had her first heart attack and open heart surgery when she was 47. And that was really traumatic for me as a child, because she and I were really close, and I couldn't really, she was always very active, so I didn't really understand what was happening. And then they never really gave her any information. And so 10 years later, she had to have another open heart surgery. During that time, I continued to get heavier and sicker, no matter what the different things were that I was trying to do to remedy the situation. And my grandma developed early onset Alzheimer's during that time, which, as many people know, is just absolutely devastating. It just is. To watch that happen to someone was terrifying to me. To watch someone completely lose their identity and everything that made them them. to even to get to the point where you lose the ability, you can't remember how to stand up, and you can't even remember how to chew. So it's so much more debilitating than just losing your memories. And so during that time, I continued to get more ill. My cholesterol was, when I finally went to the doctors and tried to get some answers, my cholesterol was 295. My triglycerides were 600. And I had tendonitis and bursitis in all my joints. So I started getting shots in my elbows and in my hips. My thumb was actually frozen in place. I wore a brace. And they put me on lots of medications and did lots of tests on me, but they could not figure out what was wrong. And I had a team of doctors, including a rheumatologist. And so after over a year of testing, I was really frustrated. And finally, I just said, you know, I want to know what's going on. Between all of you guys, that you have hundreds of years of experience between this huge team of people. So why can't anyone give me any answers? And my rheumatologist just said, look, I see people with your symptoms all the time. I don't know what's wrong with them either. And, you know, all we can do is help you manage your symptoms. And I was very angry and passionate. And I just said, do you mean to tell me that you can't help any of these people? And he said, well, some people have had luck changing their diet. And then he just kind of sent me on my way. But that was all I needed, because all I needed was a nugget. I just wanted something, because I just thought there's no way that this many people can be sick and none of us know what the problem is. And that is when, now before that, I had been a yoga instructor, and I had gotten to the point where I was so ill that I could not practice yoga. By that time, I was also 60 pounds overweight. Not once did the doctors ever ask me what I was eating. Before that day with the rheumatologist, no one even mentioned it. And they were testing me for lupus and MS and Lyme disease and, you know, all of this stuff. So I started doing research, and I really, it wasn't like I had to do years of research to find the answer. As soon as I started researching, it was right there. It was that people have these symptoms and people are helped by a plant-based diet. And I thought, why have I never heard this? And the more that I studied it, because, you know, in college I had learned how to look at studies and to see, you know, who's funding the study. I wanted to make sure I was looking at the right information. And it would seem completely legitimate. So I started changing my diet. And within, you know, the first year, I didn't really know what I was doing because I was doing all this research. And so the first year I made some changes. I only lost 6 pounds, but my pain was better. And I had given up all meat, but not all dairy. And then as I zeroed in on the problem, I was like, okay, the dairy is a huge culprit here. So I've got to get rid of the dairy. And when I did that, the weight just, like, it practically dropped off of me. So at the end of 2 years, I was off all my medications. I was no longer taking shots. And I had lost all my weight. And I actually, at that point, decided I wanted to become a personal trainer and a nutritionist. And so I started studying for my certifications. And so now, so I've been in business for about 10 years since that time, about 20 years in the industry total. And I have the certification through T. Colin Campbell's Integrative Nutrition through Cornell University, and also the Academy of Culinary Nutrition. So I have over 300 hours of professional certifications, and I've been working with clients now for over 10 years. And I developed a plan for people like me to lose weight and get healthy based on those certifications. And I just had so much success with it because, you know, it's my passion, because I want to see people recover the way that I did. And just like the doctor said, people are out there looking for answers, and they're going to their medical professionals who really only have medications to give to them, and they don't have any answers as to the problem. So that's why I'm so passionate about it. Between what happened to my grandma, what happened to me, I really want to bring this to other people.
Well, kudos to you, and we are grateful for you having been on that journey and kind of landed here now, because, when you think about where things have come, I've asked the question several times, why is it that doctors who see this all the time don't want to find out what has worked? It was probably a miracle that that doctor mentioned to you, well, I've seen, some of my patients have had some success with changing their diet. But wouldn't you think that that would be a matter of curiosity for him to say, well, what do you mean changed your diet? How? And then have that for himself to help patients? I mean, that just boggles my mind.
I think it's just their training. They aren't so the average for a doctor who usually has 8 to 10 years of actual medical training, including their internship, they have something like 72 hours of nutrition or less. I mean, that's on the outside, 72. For some, it's more like 24. And it's just not, they're trained in what surgery goes with this problem and what medication goes with this problem. I do think the tide is turning, but meanwhile, we've become the heaviest and the sickest nation on earth. We have the highest the death of infants at birth of all the developed nations. We have the highest instance of death of birth mothers right after birth of all the developed nations. And that's not even to mention, obviously, all of our heart disease and our cancer and, all of these different things. And so it's just really, it's difficult to understand why it's taken so long. And it's, why it's so focused on pharmaceuticals. I mean, there's lobbyists and there's all these different things going on. But I do see the tide changing, and that's really exciting. And that's why it's so exciting to be a part of an organization that's at the forefront of that, because so far I've gotten to, interview through Just One Thing for Health, someone in Israel and someone in Canada. These are medical doctors who are out there, spreading the message, and it's refreshing and it's amazing to see. It's exciting.
It really is. I thoroughly agree with you. And it's more than just the diet, the nutrition side of things. It's also the lifestyle. I know that you have this piece of what you do, and then we're going to get into the Bliss point. But, it's really important for people to know that there's a solution out there. But knowing that is just one piece of the puzzle. What would you say to someone who, has heard of plant-based diet and they've heard of vegetarian, they've heard of vegan, yet they're still in the space of having these issues and have not decided that it's within their power to do something about it? How do you kind of shift the tide for them?
I usually, what I do is I ask them to back up from the problem for a second and to look at how sick we are as a nation. And I ask them to look at the standard American diet, which is 70% processed foods, 25% animal products, and 5% fruits and vegetables. And that's just nowhere where we need to be. And so it's, when they look at that, that's the first thing that I show them. I say, here's where we are, and here's how sick we are. Now look at where we're supposed to be, according even to our own government, 50% fruits and vegetables. No matter really what organization you go to, you're going to get a similar recommendation, but we're not doing that. And so that's where the discrepancy lies. And also, if you look at any studies out there, and I don't care who's doing them, nobody is getting cancer from broccoli. Nobody is getting, nobody is saying, oh, those carrots, man, don't go anywhere near those. But that's what you hear about processed meats and eggs and red meat. And so these are things that people need to be aware of. They need to be aware that Harvard has come out with studies that link dairy to many different types of cancers, as well as eczema and fertility issues, and you know, a host of other, like rheumatoid arthritis, just all of these different issues. And so when you start to look at it in that way, then I just try to approach it from a common sense place. And plus, you know, it's worth a shot, right? Because whatever they're doing now isn't working. And so that's where I was. I had tried all of those different diets that promised me that it was going to get me right where I wanted to be. And so it was, I can totally understand how frustrated people are, because I was there. And I would lose a few pounds, and then I just couldn't make it stick. I didn't know why. You know, I just kept going right back. And so that's been a huge part of my research as well, has been the behavioral component. And that's what led to my interest in the Bliss Point and what we're talking about tonight, because that's a huge component of why people can't, you know, find something that's sustainable. And it's because everything that's out there, all of these fad diets and even really established diets that are out there, are totally based on addictive food. And so there's no way you're going to win with that. And so that's what I try to explain to people. And once I explain it, then they're like, ah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So tell us, what is the Bliss Point? And, you know, you mentioned addictive behaviors. What is the addictive factor that you're talking about?
well, so if for anyone who is watching this now or is going to end up watching this later, I mentioned in the short video that I talked about for the challenge, that to notice what is actually happening when you get hungry. And something that we like to say in the United States, only partially joking, is hangry, because we don't just get hungry, we get angry, and we have to have whatever food that we're craving right now. And it's not, and you're not saying to yourself, man, if I don't get an apple, it's, you know, it's going down. You're saying, I've got to have that cheeseburger, I've got to have that pizza, I've got to have these chips, I've got to have these donuts. It's all meat and dairy and processed food related when you get to that point. And you're usually shaky, and like I said, you're angry, you're not thinking clearly, you start really not to care whether you're on a diet or not, because you just want food. And it really is more like a compulsion than anything else. And that's what would happen to me. Like, for instance, if I would go on a diet, but I would feel that, that shakiness. And I might be able to stave that off for a while and kind of back off of it. Like, for instance, with something like Weight Watchers. So like for me, when I did Weight Watchers, I loved McDonald's. And so I realized pretty quickly that I could not get a #1 meal and stay on Weight Watchers, but I could get a cheeseburger and fries. And so I would go through the drive-thru and I would still get the cheeseburger and fries. But it's still that addictive food. I wasn't breaking the addiction, I wasn't breaking the habit. And so the first time I had a bad day, I would go and do the negotiation we all do with ourselves, which is that I'm going to go through, I'm going to get the #1, and then I'm not going to eat for the rest of the day, right? Which you never do. And isn't a good plan to start with, right? Because there's zero nutrition in any of that. So your body is craving that stuff because you're addicted to it. But it also, the reason that you feel kind of sick and gross for a couple of hours, but then you're hungry again because it doesn't have any nutrition and it doesn't have any fiber. And your body is still going, wait a minute, I didn't get what I needed. And you're hungry again. Plus your blood sugar is wonky from this food addiction. And so that's what I wanted to study. That's what I wanted to figure out, is what is the mechanism there? And I read a great book, which I would definitely recommend to anyone and everyone, called Salt, Sugar, Fat by Michael Moss. And you can get that on Amazon. He's a prize-winning journalist. And what he did is he went to, big food and big pharma, which all of there's 10 big food and pharma companies that own all of the smaller companies in the world. So that, we always think we have all this stuff to choose from, but really we don't, because it's all owned by the same people. But what these people do, whether it's fast food or processed food, is they invest millions of dollars in clinical studies in something called the Bliss Point. And the Bliss Point is the exact formula of salt, sugar, and fat that will keep you addicted to their product. So they do it for anything from ho-hos to pizza bites to something like McDonald's, where they're not only looking at an individual food, but a combination. So that's why I love not just the Big Mac, but the number one. And the reason I realized that is because, at some point in my journey, I realized that Diet Coke was really bad for me. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go through and I'm going to get a supersized number one with the water. So I get the water and it just doesn't taste the same. And the reason it wasn't as satisfying is because they actually do studies to see how the carbonation of that soda offsets the greasiness of the fries, offsets the sweetness of the bun, and the saltiness of the patty. It all goes together. And so that's why they have these packages, and that's why those packages appeal to you. And so that causes addiction. And they actually do studies. It's perfectly legal on people because people volunteer. And so they actually pay people to come in and they have them try different foods. And that's how they figure out which one is actually hit the Bliss Point. And so that is how we become addicted. And so if you look at so many of the diets out there, I not necessarily picking on Weight Watchers because there's a lot of diets out there, but they are one of them because they are supported by the Dairy Council, and therefore they say you have to get in 3 servings of dairy a day. You are still engaging in those addictive foods. And so those, if you're not, it's just like being an alcoholic. If I know someone's addicted to alcohol, I'm not going to say, well, what you need to do is just cut back and you're going to be fine. You have to get rid of that addiction, because until you get that monkey off of your back, you're not going to be able to stay on there's no plan that will be sustainable. And so that's, once I realized that, I realized it wasn't my fault. It wasn't just about willpower. It was about learning what the mechanism was behind which foods were addictive and why, getting those foods out of my life so that I wasn't controlled by my food. My food was the boss of me. And so that is where that came from. So now my mission is always to share that with my clients because I want them to feel empowered.
And that is so needed because, and a lot of people don't really think about it either. What we do as adults, we also are teaching and bringing our children and grandchildren into as well. And, we don't realize what we're doing to ourselves, and even more harmful, we're not realizing what we're doing to our kids. If the Bliss Point is something that impacts us to that degree, what can it be doing to our kids?
They actually do studies on the kids. They use it for kids' packaged foods as well. And, people, they'll put ads in the paper or wherever, and they'll say, will you pay $50 and bring your kid in, and they get some snacks. And so, that's how they figure it out. And now we're to the point where 3 out of every 5 children are obese. Children as young as 3 years old are being seen with heart disease. We are not just killing ourselves now, but we're killing our children, and it's an emergency situation, but it's made, more dire by the fact that it's so hard to get the information out there. And that was something that I was talking about with Dr. Goldberg last week, was he was saying how much pushback whenever even doctors at this point try to treat from a holistic standpoint, from a standpoint of food, through cancer and things like that, then they get so much negative pushback from other people in the medical community. And so it is fighting an uphill battle just to get the correct information out there. But we are doing it to our kids. And I have so many clients who will be like, you know, I was doing so great, but then I ate some of my daughter's chicken nuggets. And so I'm like, well, why does your daughter have chicken nuggets? Well, I took them through the drive-through because they're fine, but I'm the one who's on a diet. So I got to change their mindset. You know, a little bit of poison does not make it okay. You know, it's you know, if I said, hey, here's a little bit of poison, give this to your child, you would say, oh my God, no, I don't care how much poison. Well, we do it every day with our food. And it's poisonous and it's addictive, and but it's hard to get the message out.
Well, I remember talking with Dr. Barnard. We interviewed Dr. Barnard.
Yes.
And he was talking about his new book at the time, The Cheese Trap.
Yep.
And totally blew me away that dairy products have these elements that are
the casomorphins. It's shocking. So,
yes.
So casomorphins are very similar to like a morphine compound. So the way that I always explain it to my clients is, you know, when you're breastfeeding a baby, or if you've ever seen a baby breastfed and they get this really like sort of bliss, drugged out look, it's it's that morphine like compound, and it's something that nature has built in because the baby, it's survival of the species. The baby needs to stay alive, so the baby needs to want to keep coming back for that milk. And that's completely normal and great. And at some point we wean, and that's the way it's supposed to go. Except somehow, somewhere down the line, some really smart human decided that not only did we need to keep on the milk for the rest of our lives, 3 or 4 or 5 times a day, but we needed to consume it from a completely different species. And that is that, if for that species, it's meant to bring a 70-pound calf to a 1,000-pound adult in the course of a year. Those hormones are strong. And so they are adding weight to us. Even 1% milk is 23% fat by volume. I mean, this is meant for a cow. And so I have a dairy blog out there that I show people. It's called Raise Your Hand If You're a Baby Cow. Because it's just crazy that we, you know, that we do this, because even if it's organic and it doesn't have added hormones in it, it already has those same hormones in it that our breast milk has for our babies, except it's much more harmful because our immune system isn't meant to be stimulated 5 times a day or whatever throughout our whole lives. And also their milk, cow's milk is one of the most acidic milks out there in terms of mammals, and ours is one of the most alkaline. And so it's also very acidic to our system. And so there's a lot of things about it that don't make sense. And again, I just always try to come at it from a common sense. And the cheese trap is wonderful for anyone who hasn't read it, because cheese can be very addictive. It can be hard. And I tell people the same thing with that. Like you can't wean yourself. You really just have to cut it out because it has too strong of a hold on some people for them to be able to wean themselves off.
So you just have to go cold turkey on the dairy.
You really do.
I can really relate to it. I think I mentioned to you about, you know, my mid to late 20s landing in the hospital because I was passing kidney stones, and an amazing nurse happened to be, you know, doing what she needed to do in my room at the time and was inquiring, what did you eat today? And I had a couple of bowls of cereal that day, and she was like, check your diet. I recommend you stop dairy. Don't drink any more milk. And I was like, do you think that's it? And it made calcium, you know, kidney stones are calcium deposits that are moving through you. And I thought, okay, all right, I'm done with dairy. And it was shortly after that that a lot of things in my life changed. I've got a similar story as you as far as the up and down and, you know, getting to the point where in my late teens, I got very ill. And I remember just bedridden for weeks. And could not eat anything. And I probably lost 50, 60 pounds. And when I finally emerged from it and went back to school, people were coming up to me and saying, Lynn, is that you? And little did I know that I had changed that much, but it really impacted me. Well, if not eating will do that and allow your body to reset. I spent a lot of the next several years not eating. And it made me, I think, a little more sensitive to the whole fast food stuff. And one of the things that I remember doing one time was going to the drive-thru and saying, can you put more lettuce on my sandwich? Which was totally unheard of.
I can imagine you're probably like, what?
And then, to my wonderment, to see some fast food restaurants bringing in side salads and trying to do the balance. We want to keep our customers. We're still going to feed them the cheeseburger and the soda and the fries. We'll let them have a side salad too, or some apples for the kids, some apples in a little pack. And that's still just very pacifying.
Yeah.
When it comes to what the Bliss Point is all about, right?
Right, because most of those things, anything that has the Bliss Point is an engineered food, and they can't really call it food. So like McDonald's, their stuff has to be called food products. It's not even really, they can't even call it food. Because when you strip everything away and really when you add vitamins back in, it's all synthetic. And so it really isn't food anymore. It is a food product. And it's scary that we're really just sort of, pickling ourselves with all of these chemicals. And we're starving, even though we're overweight, and we're starving nutritionally. We're not getting the fiber that we need. Most Americans get about 1/3 of the fiber that they need. And yet all we talk about is protein, when most Americans get 2 to 3 times the amount of protein that they need. There was someone on my Facebook yesterday who had started a keto diet, and she was eating, lots of like meat and lettuce wraps and stuff like that, because with keto, you can't really consume any kind of carbohydrate. And so she was eating tons of meat and cheese and things, and a little tiny bit of veggies. And she started to develop gout in her elbows. And immediately when I saw this, I'm not close to her, but as I saw it developing on Facebook, I thought, oh no, this is uric acid buildup from all of those animal products that she's eating. But I don't know her that well, and so I'm not in the habit of just telling people, hey, you need to change your diet. But then she went to the doctor and she said, they put me on this medication and I'm having all this uric acid. And so, we did have a conversation about, this is something you may want to look at, because with this particular diet, this is what can happen. But yeah, there's lots of dangers. You don't see anybody getting in any kind of medical trouble from eating too much fruits and vegetables. But you see it, or really with grains, if they're whole grains. Where you see the problem is with all of the animal products. And so that's, I tell people all the time, I'm a businesswoman and I'm a logical person who's trying to keep my own health where it should be. If I thought meat and cheese were the answer, that's what I would tell everyone. I mean, if I really thought that was it, I would say, hey, this is the miracle. We can eat all of the processed food and meat and cheese we want. But the truth is that that's just making us sick. And so, it's not a popular message, but it's something that I've got to get out there to people to let them know that the reason they're being controlled by their food is there is a chemical reason behind it. And once they figure that out, hopefully my goal is with them is that I can sort of hold their hand and take them through as they step out of the matrix and start to realize what the truth really is and really get empowered to live their own life. Because that's really, for me, what it's about is empowerment. You know, it's about being able to make your choices. So my food, it doesn't control me anymore. You know, I don't eat that stuff anymore. And I not only do I not crave it, but I'm so much healthier. I'm like a totally different person. And I think differently. I look different. I started running 2 years ago for the first time in my entire life. I didn't even run when I was in high school. I ran a half marathon last year. I mean, it really is, to me, it's like a fountain of youth. And that's the message I want to get out to people is you don't have to live your life sick and overweight and tired. You know, there's a better way.
And if you find yourself in any of that, there is a solution. And I think that's one of the things that we at Just One Thing for Health really focus on, because, you know, the problem is evident with obesity and, you know, the chronic diseases that people have. And what is so sad, actually, is that the solution is there. The solution has been there, and we're just finding it out. And thank you, Lori, because it's because of people like you, it's because of people like Peter and all of the doctors that we're bringing to this program to share the information that they have and the success stories that they've seen. I mean, just to hear Dr. Esselstyn talk about the number of patients who show up at his door, you know, knocking on death's door, and he's like, well, you know, you've got two choices. One, I can crack your chest open and take a piece of your thigh and put it in your heart, or you can change and eat this diet. And it's, you know, when you think about doing a whole food plant-based diet, you know, a lot of people think, you know, well, it means that I won't be able to do this and I won't be able to do that and I won't be able to do this. And, you know, it's making me feel like I don't have the freedom to do what I want. Address that for us, Lori.
So I hear that a lot. And it's interesting to hear Dr. Esselstyn talk about it, because he will talk about how people will choose to have their chest cracked open instead of changing their diet. And that is, I don't have an explanation for that, except food addiction. Because that's it, and people think that that's freedom. They think, well, I want to be able to eat whatever I want. I actually had a client say to me one time, if I can't continue to have deep dish pizza, my life is not worth living. She said it to me in 100% seriousness, and I believed her that that's what she thought. And that's food addiction. That's not, I want the freedom to eat deep dish pizza. That is, I'm so dependent on it that I can't imagine my life without it. And I've heard people say any number of things like that to me that are similar, and that's not freedom. You know, when I used to, I felt the freedom to go eat an entire box of Krispy Kremes in my car and throw away the box behind my house so no one would know. But was it really freedom? No, that's enslavement to your food. And there was nothing about that. You know, it tasted good while I was eating it, and immediately I felt horrible. It was awful for my body. And that is, you know, we all have done things like that. And so that's in the program that I offer people, I really talk a lot about behavioral change and food addiction. It doesn't just mean that you're, you know, that you sit down and you eat an entire box of donuts like I did. Food addiction can just be the stuff that we were talking about today, which is that you really feel like you can't live your life unless you have certain things. So what I do is I have developed something called the power of substitutions, where I have my clients eating a really clean, whole foods, plant-based diet about 85% of the time. But then the rest of the time, they can have, I will show them how to do substitution foods, where if you're craving a Big Mac, I will show you how to make it a plant-based Big Mac, and it will knock your socks off, and it'll be delicious, and it'll hit the spot. And you never have to feel like, oh no, I went off plan. Oh no, I really blew it. And now I'm gonna have to be in the shame spiral till next Monday. because none of us know how to start a diet any day but Monday. So you just get into this whole like thing in your head, like I failed. And it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, you can eat plant-based all the time and be really healthy. So my husband John and I, in our cookbook, we have 67 recipes, and we have things like gravy and biscuits, and tempeh Reuben, and tempeh ribs, and mac and cheese, and all of it is vegan. And also in our case, it's all gluten-free, which you would never know. So it's, you know, it's so much easier than people think. And so that way you can always, that's the way that I live, so that I'm always on plan. I don't ever feel, you know, I don't ever get triggered by those addictions because of that. And so that's why what I try to get across to people is you can still go to your cookout. You can still go out to eat. There's so many options now. It's not a life of deprivation like people think it is.
Well, you know, I'm glad you brought this point up, because I believe that one of the psychological things that people really deal with is, if I do this, does that mean that I can only eat raw vegetables and salads and
grass and water?
Grass and water. And then there's the other piece of it too. You know, if I can eat other stuff, how do I figure out what it is? And so I'm really glad that you mentioned the cookbook, because that's been probably my biggest challenge. I'm having to spend the time to research recipes and then test them out, and then, you know, taste testing them, and oops, I did something wrong. Dish that one. So tell us how you help people get through that process.
So I went through that for years, as you can imagine, because I grew up very meat and potatoes. And I, like everybody else, our main meals were, I knew how to make a really nice meatloaf with mashed potatoes. I made, you know, things like hamburger helper and tuna helper. And I was just your very typical standard American diet eater. So when it came to trying to cook healthy meals, I really didn't have any idea what I was doing. And I remember, so this was like the better part of 15 years ago, I didn't even know. I looked at this recipe and I was like, okay. So I go to Whole Foods and I go up to somebody and I say, I need to know where the quinoa is. And she goes, do you mean the quinoa? I said, I was like, I don't know. Do I? I didn't know what it was. So it is stuff like that. Like, not only I didn't know what it was, I didn't know what it looked like, I didn't know where to find it, I didn't even know how to pronounce it. And so that does stop a lot of people. It's a lot of mental work. So what I do is in my program, I actually have a video where I'm holding up boxes and I'm holding up packages and I'm holding up foods and I'm saying, hey, have you ever seen this? This is what this is, and this is what you do with it, and this is where you find it in the grocery store. And so because I wish that's what I would have had, is somebody to say, hey, here, you know. And I actually do have a video where I'm going through Whole Foods, pointing things out, and showing you where to get stuff on Amazon and what stuff looks like in different places at the grocery store. And that's a page in my cookbook, as well as, like, you know, here's some different foods that I use and how I stock my pantry. And I never meal prep, by the way. That is just, I don't have time for all that. Bless y'all who are out there doing it. I feel you. I think that's awesome. I give you props, but that is not me. I don't have time. Or, you know, I don't want to let's be honest, I don't want to do it. So what I do is I stock my kitchen and I show people how to stock their kitchen so they never have to meal prep, and they can just, you know, they can make something on the fly that's really delicious. And I give them these recipes, and then I have cooking tutorials. And so I have, you know, videos that say, here's me cooking this, you know, and here's exactly what I do. And so it's just, I try to make it as easy for people as I can, because I know, you know, that was my biggest challenge, is what I would eat. I would eat mixing bowls full of salad because I was so hungry and I didn't know what else to eat. And so that, I mean, it's great for you, but there's only so many times you can do that. So that's what I try to do, is really help people, you know, understand some of the foods that they might not be familiar with, where they can find them and how they can cook them, just to take the mystery out.
Well, that is awesome, because that is probably one of the biggest issues that people, especially, you know, with our audience, it's people who are curious about what is a whole food plant-based diet and lifestyle. And then it's like, so if I step on this train and I'm on this journey, what does that mean? And so, you know, one of the things that we are committed to bringing our audience is, so how do I go through my pantry and clean it out?
Right.
And how do I restock my pantry with
Right.
that I need? How do I create the grocery list that's actually going to get me to the grocery and buying the things that I really need to bring into my house now that I am on this journey? And so I would really like to invite all of our audience to stay in this space with us. Lori and I are going to do some short videos, and we'll be releasing those over the course of time to help you with finding certain pieces of information, because it's in the pieces of information that lead you through the times of change. And
Right.
so we want to support you in that. And we want you to know that we're here to support you. We're here to help you on this journey, through this journey. And we've got some exciting things that we are planning to do in the premium membership. So remember, up through March 31st, you qualify when you subscribe to the Just One Thing for Health program. You will get 3 months premium access, and it hasn't even started yet. So you're getting some of this now, and then when the access is open, your 3 months will be there, and the 3 months ends at March 31st. Now, I'm not going to tell you what happens after that, but it won't be 3 months. So we want you to share this, tell your friends, share Lori's magnificence, because she's our resident nutritionist, and she's going to be in here helping you. We want to invite you to connect with her, to check out her programs, check out her videos. They're awesome. And it's all about learning. So be open to learning more about how you can support yourself and others in your sphere of influence who are just starting this journey. And if you have kids, I'm a grandmother, and this is really hit home for me, because I have seen my grandson grow, what, I 4 feet in the last 4 years. He's 16, he's 5'11", and I remember him saying, "Oh, my elbows hurt, my knees hurt." Well, that was definitely growth spurt. And I was there to say, "Come on, let's go eat some salad."
Yeah.
And cooking the things that he likes that are healthy. Now, did he get some of the other stuff? Yes, but one of the things that I recognize too is that this whole milk thing is something that we really have to address. And
Well, what I was just going to say was, with my program, that's the first thing I address, and that's how my program is different. Most people, when they work with someone who's trying to transition them to a whole foods plant-based diet, they say, well, let's get the meat out first. I actually have people get rid of the dairy, because that is what is so addictive. And then if, we move away from the meat from there, and some people end up, it's a transition for people. Some people embrace it immediately. For some people, it takes a little bit longer, and that's totally okay, because I meet them where they are, and I help them through it every step of the way. But dairy is the first thing, because that to me is just, I'm hardcore on it, because there is barely a cancer it's not tied to. And it is physically addictive. It's inflammatory. It's acidic. It's great and wonderful for baby cows. But that's, That's if I, and that what I always tell people too, and this is going to be a little bit, you know, graphic, but if I showed up somewhere and I said, you know, you guys know how healthy I am, here, have some of my breast milk. People would be like, oh no. But if I have the milk of a sick cow, then they'll take it. And that does not make any sense in our society. The way that we're handling this just makes no sense at all. And so that's where, you know, if I can get people to that point where they're like, okay, you're right, this doesn't make sense, then we go from there and we work on the rest from there. But that's the first place we start, because that's got to come out first.
I totally agree. I think it was easier for me knowing that dairy was gone to, you know, make other adjustments. One of the things that I wanted to say too is that we're scheduling one of the upcoming doctors that we'll be interviewing, who is a pediatrician. And when I heard the story of some of the things that she has seen, young girls with 12 years old with breast cancer because of drinking milk, ovarian cancer in young girls, you know, that in adolescent girls, how does that happen? But and what do we have to look at but our food? Our bodies tell us a story. And when we are open to listening to what that story is, then we know what to search for. We know what answers we need. And Lori, I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of the story that tells the answers, that shares the solutions. And just as we're wrapping up, is there anything else that you want our audience to know about what you do and just what's on your heart to impart to them?
I think that for me, the heart of what I do, what I call myself, is an empowerment coach. And the reason is, when I got rid of my food addictions and when I got all of that off of me, I was able to really be my true self. And I felt empowered as a person, because that unempowerment that I was feeling in my nutrition that was holding me down was happening in other places in my life. And so when I got my nutrition right, it was a domino effect. And it affected how not just my body, but how I felt about myself. And when you feel differently about yourself, your relationships are affected, your work is affected, your relationship with your kids is affected. Everything was touched by that. And so I guess if you can only start one place, and that's the best way to do it, then, you know, starting with your health is huge. And taking that step is, you know, it takes some courage because it's not in your comfort zone. But what happens is, if you stick to it, you develop a new comfort zone. And that's what's happened to me. And that's what I always tell my clients is, if you stay with it long enough. And I see that, you know, Tammy was on here today. And I think Tammy says I'm awesome. And I thank you. And I think you're awesome as well, because Tammy is one of those people who she's sticking with it. And she is seeing that change over time. And changing not only the way she's eating, but the way she feels about herself. And there's nothing more gratifying for me than to see that. And so, so from a inspirational standpoint, I would say that in terms of what I am doing, I do have a program, but I actually also have a free webinar coming up, where I'm going to be talking more in depth about how it's starting with the Bliss Point, but actually how it affects our bodies and causes something called leaky gut, and how that can cause us to not be able to lose weight. And it can even cause things like depression and hormone suppression because of where our hormones are made, which is in our gut. So I'm going to be talking about all of that. That's on March 19th. It's completely free. And I'll be posting a link to that. And I think it's also on the Just One Thing for Health website, and also in the email. People can join that, and I'll just be giving more information about what that looks like, because that was inflammation was another huge piece of the puzzle for me. I knew my body was inflamed, but I did not know that my gut was inflamed and how many problems that was causing, and because I didn't even know what that looked like. And so finding that out was a huge piece of the puzzle for me, so I'll be passing that along on March 19th.
Fabulous. I will be there.
Okay, good. And it'll be in the same format. So people, it'll be a webinar in Zoom, and there'll be like a slideshow, so I can have some things to show you, but people can also ask questions.
Fabulous. And before we actually close things down, is there anyone in our audience who has any questions that they'd like for Lori to address? You can put it in the chat box, or you can join us here live. And we will get you unmuted and get you on camera. Anyone interested in asking a question. And I see that we have your amazing husband, the chef, who does whole food plant-based cooking on here. Hi, John.
He probably doesn't know. He could, let's see, we could get him to talk.
If he's there, I welcome him to unmute and say hello to everyone. We're happy to have you. And, you know, I mentioned some of the things that we have in store for our audience. And one of them is actually talking to this amazing chef and having him to talk about some of the things that he does to make what he's doing so exciting. And then he is part of the videos that are part of Lori's program and some of the things on her website. So you'll be able to see him in action already. But John, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, there he is. Welcome. Just wanted to say hi to you. And I'm sure that there is one question that you might be able to drop on our resident nutritionist here.
Well, the last time I asked a question, it was about keto. So I'm not going to go that route.
That was a hot topic, yeah.
So let's go with, so when you were switching over to your plant-based diet, and you finally got the hang of it, did you ever really miss meat?
And actually, and I tell people this all the time, the only thing that I missed was the worst stuff, which was like pork, like bacon, brats, stuff like that, because back then, there just wasn't any kind of good substitute. I remember trying a veggie dog back about, maybe 12 years ago, and I physically gagged. It was that disgusting. Now they have these Beyond brats. So when I'm talking about substitute foods, if I really am craving something, there are, we make a rice paper bacon that is to die for. And that is John's creation, actually. So, back then that was the only thing. Now I don't miss it because there are so many substitutes out there that if I really am craving something, I can have something similar. I can have a burger. They have so many great plant-based options now. But what I would say to anybody who is transitioning, and I think, John, you said this, you said you were surprised that you didn't really miss it. And that was the truth for me too. I was like, wow, I've eaten meat my whole life, and I'm surprised it's not harder than this. It was really, that was the biggest shock, was that it wasn't that hard. And I've heard that from other clients as well.
I'd agree with that.
Good to know. Good to know. Something to keep in mind as we are on this journey, to hear stories that others are saying that they've made this transition and it was easier than they thought. And not only that, they didn't miss it when they got on the other side. So keep that in mind as you look to empower yourself. And empower yourself first with this information, and second with taking inspired action to really change your health by adopting this whole food plant-based diet. And, you know, I heard a couple of times, 80%. So you don't have to go into your brain and say, oh my God, I can't do this. You can do it if you know that you could still have a little bit. And I love the idea of the substitutions. And that's some information that we're going to get out to folks as well. Because it's hard to substitute when you don't know what to substitute stuff with.
Right. That's a whole meeting within itself.
And that's part of what's going to be available to others or to our audience in our premium membership. We're actually building a base of practitioners who will be available as part of the practitioner side of Just One Thing for Health. But what they're doing is actually supporting what all of the doctors who are out there in these medical practices themselves being whole food plant-based and teaching it to their clients. And they can't be there with you all the time. Our practitioners on the other side can. They're here to support you, like Lori and John. And we're building more, and you'll meet more. So be sure to come back and join us again next week. Let's see. Let me pull out my cheat sheet and see who we have for next week. You're going to like this one. Why say no to GMOs?
Ooh, that's a great topic. So interesting.
So we have a couple of holistic doctors, Dr. Susanna and Benjamin Alter, who are going to be talking about why say no to GMOs. And man, you're going to love their challenge video. So make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already, so that you can get the email that goes out on Saturday that will give you their challenge and a lot of information to get you started. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you to all of our audience members who came in, and I see some familiar names over there, G and Tammy, thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you all. And comment on our Facebook page, Just One Thing for Health in Facebook. We're going to be sharing some stuff, and we're going to start pushing out some additional information, like Dr. Furman is going to be in Aspen, Colorado, and we're going to do a special broadcast with him on April 6th. And it's going to be awesome. Stay tuned for that. And G, would Dr. Greger say that plant-based meat products are not healthy, whole food, plant-based nutritional foods, due to the fact that such substitute meat products are so processed? Wow, what a question.
Yes, he would. He would definitely say that. And my goal is to make the diet sustainable by getting people to eat really healthy, which would be Dr. Greger approved, 85% of the time. What I found with people over the years is that what would happen is they would be doing really well, and something like a holiday or a day out with friends or a trip to the pub or whatever the thing might be would trip them up. So I have those substitution foods, that list and those recipes available for those times, so that they can still be plant-based, but then they can actually be out there living their lives and they don't feel as deprived. So that's sort of the way that I help them deal with it to make it a sustainable lifestyle. I never present those things as, you know, oh, this is a health food. So, it's like any junk food, really. But I'm realistic in that I know that my clients are out there trying to make the best choices that they can. And if they're in a situation where they're at a cookout or they're tailgating or they're doing something where there's, it's not necessarily going to be Dr. Greger approved, I want them to be able to have foods that they feel like they can still have fun with their friends and yet stay on plan. So that's what I help people get to that point.
Great. Thank you for your answer. Awesome. And it's this kind of information, and this is real talk. This is like no holds barred, because we want you to know exactly what you're up against and exactly where you're being supported. We know that, unless you're one that's going under the knife to get your chest cracked open, and you got this or that as an alternative, this does not include the substitutes that we're talking about.
Absolutely. If someone has cancer or heart disease or diabetes, I would never recommend those foods to them, even as a treat. That's sort of a different situation. But for a lot of the clients, most of the people who come to me, they're sort of at the beginning of that process. They've been told they have high cholesterol, but they're, you know, maybe not quite to that point yet where they need to be medicated, or, you know, their doctor might be talking about it, or they're saying, hey, you're pre-diabetic. You know, and they're trying to lose the weight and get healthy and turn it around before it gets to that point. So yeah, there definitely is a difference between what we would tell different groups of people.
Great. I'm glad that came up.
Yeah.
Good. Well, everyone, I think that we're going to wrap things up for now. Lori, thank you. John, thanks for hanging out for a minute. And all of our audience, thanks for joining us. Whether you are live with us now or watching the recording, remember, go to our Facebook page and put some comments in there. Where are you on your journey? Has it been easy? Are you just getting started? Do you need some additional help and support? We're here to help. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks to all of the Just One Thing for Health team that works on the videos and all the behind the scenes things that happen for your benefit. And we will see you back here again next week.
All right, sounds good.
All right. Bye for now.